My name's Richard Davis, and I'm one of the Pro Vice Chancellors at Newcastle University. So we have a number of Pro Vice Chancellors who sit on Executive Board reporting to the Vice Chancellor, and we try and look after every dimension of the university, including the 3 faculties and the faculties you would have studied in when you were at the university. And I'll just be chairing this discussion, but it's a great pleasure to welcome our panelists who are going to talk about their insights into the careers that they've had so far in the energy sector. And I also worked in the energy sector. I worked for ExxonMobil for 8 years before leaving in 2003. So our panelists are Dr. Mark Ireland and Joey Aoun and Kirill Holstov, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, and then we'll have a bit of a roundtable discussion. But we'll kick off with Mark, then Joey, and then Kirill's, just 5 minutes each to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll have a round table discussion. Please do put any questions you have into the chat, and keep your microphones off if you wouldn't mind, just to keep noise levels down in case you've got a dog or a cat or a child or whatever you may have that we know can interfere with Zoom calls these days. Okay, so I'll hand over to Mark just to quickly introduce himself, and then go to Joey and then Kirill's.
Thanks, Richard. Good evening, everyone. So as Richard said, I'm Mark. I'm a lecturer at Newcastle University in energy geosciences. I have an undergraduate degree in Earth and Exploration Geosciences from Cardiff, and then a PhD from Durham. So my journey to Newcastle it's my current employer. That's how I landed at Newcastle. My career in the energy industry, when I completed my PhD, I joined BP, and I spent 9 years at BP Exploration in a variety of largely technical roles related to geology. But during my time there, the energy sector changed hugely, and my career journey there changed along with it. During my almost 10 years there, global CO2 emissions grew by about 10% in that 10-year period. Oil demand went up by about the same figure. Gas demand went up by more. And there was, huge changes in energy commodity prices during that time. My career followed those changes. My career wasn't. I was just a geologist, so I worked on exploration projects, but towards later stages of my time at BP, I worked on technology projects, and even at the very end worked on greenhouse gas mitigation strategies. So even in 2017-18, before many of the large companies started talking about net zero, they were already looking towards it. And then that led me to Newcastle, where I wanted a change of tact, and I joined Newcastle in 2019 to become a lecturer in energy geosciences, and now I apply most of the technical understanding I have to trying to understand low carbon energy resources. So rather than looking for fossil fuels under the ground, I'm looking at geothermal energy, I'm looking towards energy storage, and so a change in tack, but using many of the skills that I've learned along the way, both in my education, but also in my time at BP Exploration. I think I'll just I'll stop there for now.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. So Kirill's.
Thanks very much. So my name is Kirill Holstov. I'm a Newcastle University graduate. So I graduated 2 years ago with an integrated master's degree in civil and structural engineering. And since I have been working for a major global engineering consultancy called AECOM. So I'm an engineer working in rail, bridges, and structure sector, which is a part of the civil engineering industry. And so perhaps I'm not directly tied to the energy sector, but at the same time, when you consider infrastructure as a system, pretty much everything depends on the energy sector. And I'm sure I'll be able to provide a good insight into how it affects us and how, for example, carbon emissions affect the civil engineering industry. And also talk about some of the opportunities we have for graduates in that regard. So at AECOM, I'm also a member of AECOM Europe Net Zero Resilient Future Group, which steers our climate change response in Europe. And I'm also an active member of the Institution of Civil Engineers. I'm the climate change representative of the IC in the northeast of England. And I lead and support different climate change sustainability initiatives. Within the Central IC, I'm a member of the Carbon Champions panel. And so this initiative aims to identify and showcase the best practice in terms of carbon reduction, which also includes energy, but is mostly focused on the civil engineering industry. And then finally, perhaps the thing that is worth mentioning is that recently I was selected to represent Latvia at the Youth Climate Summit in Milan, which is one of the pre-COP26 events. And yeah, I'm very excited to collaborate with everyone, including people in the energy sector. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Kirill. So Joey, could you kick off?
Sure, thank you. So myself, I come from a background in architecture, which later I specialized in sustainability. So I graduated with a master's in architecture in 2014. And then I pursued studies because of my passion towards sustainability and the green built environment. I pursued further studies in green building technologies and in urban energy planning at Newcastle University in 2018. Currently, I'm an environmental designer in a large international architecture firm in London. And initially, I had like a barrier to start my career was the diversity of background of peoples that they might have coming to the sustainability environmental design field. Actually, this was a barrier because I didn't know the directions of what to specialize in, but then it was an opportunity knowing that in disregarding the field I can come from, I can tailor this and be an added value to the business I would like to join. And in my day-to-day basis, what we do, we work collaboratively with other professionals to embed sustainability in the design of and the built environment, being on different scales from building to master plan and city scale. And so I would say sustainability used to be a nice to have previously, but today is a must have. And this is where I'm coming from and what I do on a day-to-day basis. I would like maybe to expand later in the Q&A on the biggest challenges and what are tips for future professionals joining the career. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much to our three panelists. So we're going to open it up to questions. I'm just looking through the list looking through the chat. There is a specific question here, which let's perhaps tackle it, but it's not really about careers as such, and it's more about the future of the energy, the future of the energy mix going forwards. But let's tackle it anyway. But we will then need to move on to tell us about some of the key attributes and skills, etc., that you found particularly important. So this one's about the future of gas and the energy transition. Do you think it's going to be competitive compared to renewables? Would gas still be acceptable even after developing low carbon footprint concepts that will significantly reduce greenhouse gas emissions? I'm interested in this in the field of research and development on materials of low electric energy consumption with lower CO2 emission, hydrogen engines, etc. Career progressions such as CEng registration procedures and advantages. I would like to know how we're going to keep the lights on during a calm winter's night. There's quite a lot in there, and I think it's a very, very wide-ranging question. But there is something around careers, around CEng. How about we turn that into, has professional accreditation been part of, I'm going to take one very small part of that question. Professional accreditation, important or not in your energy careers? Go ahead, Joe, you kick off.
I can start with that because, like yesterday, I had the news of me getting the CEng, the Chartered Engineering title. So it's quite fresh as a news. So on that, it was one of the tips, actually. I had a list of tips for people pursuing similar careers. And on the top of the list is getting accreditations and recognition in your career. So this is really more than getting your qualifications approved or checked or reviewed. But this would give you confidence to be part of this larger network of professionals in your career. So talking about CEng specifically, it's a route that you can pursue through institutions. I did pursue it myself through CIBSE, which is the Chartered Institution for Building Services Engineers. And what you do, the process requires you post academic experience, requires you like 5 years or more maybe of professional experience to gather some of the competencies that are required, but it's highly recommended and it's highly acknowledged at work. So once you have the title, professionals around you know that you are to a standard where you are a qualified chartered engineer. And this is when your journey would start as and for you to be part of a big network of professionals. So highly recommended.
Okay, that's very helpful. And of course, Mark has a different background from you and Kirill. Is Mark on a professional accreditation?
Yeah, so geoscientists, geologists, geophysicists, there are accreditations in the UK. It's through the Geological Society of London, that accreditation. And there are different accreditation schemes around the world as well. So in North America and Canada and the US, there are different accreditation schemes. I think there's been pretty much quite a dynamic shift. I think when I started my professional career at BP, accreditation was seen as a nice to have. But there were a lot of barriers to it. Oil and gas companies traditionally quite sensitive around their data, and so that peer review process that's required for accreditation for geology sometimes made those conversations difficult. By the time I was leaving, accreditation was starting to become not quite the norm, but much more commonplace, recognizing that actually it's good career development for early career stage geoscientists to get that accreditation. It's something that shows training and experience beyond their academic qualifications.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? Because I'm a geologist as well, and I agree with what Mark said. It hasn't been important in my career, and it wasn't something I was encouraged to do. Although when incidents happen, such as the BP Macondo disaster, questions were asked about, well, what professional accreditation have you got to drill boreholes in the Gulf of Mexico safely? And so in some parts of the geoscience career, it is more important than others, but it's generally not been fantastically important for me. But Kirill, can you add around your experience here? Has it been important? Is it something you have looked into?
Yeah, absolutely. Professional accreditation is something that I'm pursuing at the moment. And for my company, ACOM is highly encouraged. And I'm currently working towards a chartership, of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And in the civil engineering industry, we have many different organizations who provide through the chartership. But I would say overall, chartership is there to just put you in the right mindset. On your route to chartership, you have to tick off certain attributes, and it pushes you to find certain experiences, and also develop your skills, and keep connected with your network, and just continue developing professionally. And I think in that regard, it's very important. But otherwise, it's kind of like a standard for standard for professional, because it just writings on a screen or on a piece of paper. What it really is, it proves that what skills you have, and you can have those skills without accreditation, but having the accreditation helps you to prove people that you have that mindset and those certain skills, and also, well, it just helps you to work towards that mindset if you are graduate and you haven't quite developed it yet.
Okay, I've got a question for you because there hasn't been another one popped up yet. But the more provocative we get, gentlemen, the more likely we're going to get a question coming in. So feel free to be provocative.
If may I, Richard, just add one thing on professional registration, that one can really pursue two different professional registration at the time. So if you are to build a diverse background, multidisciplinary background like myself, so I come from a background in architecture and I later specialized in environmental design. So at the moment I'm working to be a chartered architect and a chartered engineer. So one can really specify to go in two routes and prove himself professionally in two routes, not just dedicated to one, just as a note.
Yeah, no, very good. Okay, so I've got a quick question for you, and there's something that's come in on the chat. This is a really fast changing world we're living in, and the energy area is as dynamic as any, really. I mean, how do you stay up to date? How do you feel that, you know, I'm on top of my game, I'm at the arrowhead of all of this, and therefore, you know, I'm always relevant, and I don't feel insecure about my role going forwards. I actually feel I'm on top of my game and not insecure about my role going forwards and the future of me in my career. How do you just stay on that sort of just at the front of it all? How do you what do you do? Is it conferences? Is it articles? What are you doing? How's it work?
I think there's a couple of things. It actually depends where you are in that career stage. So if you're just starting out in your career, an example would be the questions I got asked at my graduate interview were very similar to the questions I asked in graduate interviews at later stages in my career, i.e. core technical competencies. At least in geoscience, I suspect it's probably similar for engineering. Those core technical competencies haven't changed drastically. You still have to be able to have a certain understanding of certain processes or physical processes that occur. They will never go out of date. Absolutely, there is no chance that basic understanding will go out of date. Staying on top of the broader understanding, I think that's about an awareness and understanding where your skills sit in a wider context. So you don't have to have deep technical expertise across that breadth, and at least not in geosciences, but understanding where your technical skills fit within that broader landscape is the important thing to keep on top of. And that's what's changing fast.
Okay, Joey or Kirill, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to build on the point that Mark has made. I think that core technical knowledge is very important in that regard. And of course, the core technical skills is essentially what you initially get hired for and what at the basis of your job. But what the real challenge is there very much growing requirement for general knowledge. You know, since the world is developing very quickly and we're trying to pursue net zero carbon, AI, you know, sustainable development, etc. In pretty much across the board, people need to stay aware and you know, continues to develop their general knowledge and be aware of what's happening in the other industries. And I think even though your core technical knowledge may allow you to keep your job, the general knowledge will allow you to stay competitive, because you like much of the innovation is happening on like cross-industry basis and cross-sector basis. So, for example, in civil engineering, as we're connected with the energy sector, we constantly have to monitor the developments in the energy sector and how we can utilize it in, you know, the most advanced developments. And for example, AI, how we can automate things. Even though as a civil engineer, I don't have a degree in like computer science or programming, so I don't know much about AI, but I need to stay aware of how it works, what are the latest developments, and how I can utilize it for a benefit. And in that regard, actually, your chartership and membership with a professional institution helps, because they keep you up to date with those developments, and they sometimes will actually issue mandatory continuous professional development. So, for example, with the institution of civil engineers, something that they're looking to do is is introduce mandatory CPD. So even though people are required to do a certain number of hours CPD, which they can choose themselves, so depending on their career plan, there will be mandatory CPD, which will essentially mandate certain topics.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. Joey, anything? You don't have to add anything, Joey, but please do.
Yeah, sure. So I can second what the previous panelist said, but on top of that, I would say that continuous development, professional development can be through networking as well. So it's not only something that we read and research online about it. So the more we meet people, we mix with other professionals, the more we're likely to learn from them. So it's all about knowledge exchange. So us sharing our knowledge and then learning from others. This is another aspect beside then reading, researching, and keeping up to date with your day-to-day career. And it's more like a responsibility of yours to stay in your career, because you cannot really 2 years after graduation still talk about what you learned in university, whereas things are changing nowadays. So it's a responsibility for you to stay in the business and to give your client the most up-to-date solutions to their problems.
Yeah, that's great. Great set of answers. Thanks so much. I just want to add one little quick comment is, as you get moved around an organization, you're being tested and you're having to prove yourself over and over again. So I worked in 3 or 4 teams in the space of 8 years, and every time I needed to sort of prove myself again, and that kept me, that's what I remember of it. Anyway, it was a long time ago. I've got a question that's come in around, if you had lawyers or third parties advising you in your roles, I mean, perhaps this is more relevant to Joey and Kirill's right now, but perhaps Mark in his previous life in BP, do you expect them to be accredited and for them to have a deep understanding of the energy sector? Or, I mean, how does that work? If you met lawyers where you felt, wow, that that information you have, that context thing is really powerful. So that's one that's come in. I don't know how easy it is to answer that, but give it a go.
I can give it a go. So I can talk about other professionals, like beside than lawyer, being architect or others, they have to have the chartership title before they do professional work in the industry. So you cannot sign like some drawings or planning permits for a building without having your chartership title. But when it comes to lawyers or any other professionals, we maybe not necessarily to have an energy field recognition in their career, but obviously this will be an added value, as Mark said, like this would prove that this person is qualified. So if we don't need to research this, investigate this ourselves, but this is already proven, and this will, as Richard mentioned earlier, that qualification as such, the client can come back to us. Was anyone registered or chartered? Who qualified you to do the work? So so this obviously would be an added value. It might not be necessary, but it's an added value for us to seek for.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I guess specifically on kind of lawyers and legal positions, actually a surprising amount of the projects I've worked on, there would be legal counsel or lawyers involved. Patent experts is another example of quite specialist skill sets. And I think Joey said earlier that networking as a way to learn. I think that the best legal counsel or patent people I worked with were those that were able to absorb those through the meetings, through learning, through informal channels. Obviously, you can't be expected to have in-depth technical knowledge as a legal counsel, because you'll cover such a vast topic area in an energy company. But if you've got an awareness of all the different pieces, and the key skill that I saw that people had is they knew who to ask the questions to. So you didn't have, if you were worked in the patent office, you didn't need to know all the technical details. You just need to know who you needed to ask to get the details you need. And so that networking piece in the energy sector, because it's so multidisciplinary, is vital. Communication is kind of a key skill that everyone needs.
And adding on professional registration, it will increase the liability of the professional. So he will be more liable in regards to the institution he is chartered under. So this would give us, even as someone seeking legal advice from a person who's registered, will give us even more confidence and more security that this person is highly liable for the institution that he has the accreditation from. So this is another added value too.
Okay, thanks. There's been a couple of comments coming on into the chat, and Rebecca's encouraging to you to ask any questions you want to. I might throw in another couple of questions and a couple of comments. So we've talked a little bit about CPD being important, networks, and engaging with professional societies in keeping skilled up, and that seems like a really important point, that you know that you come out of a degree and you never stop learning. We've got the panelists, we've got two people without a PhD, one with a PhD, and Mark, I think you did a master's as well. You know, all these letters you've collected, these degrees you've collected, I mean, does it really make that much difference? Was it wasted time? And you spent a lot of it with me as well. So, because I was your PhD supervisor, but you know, PhD, masters, you know, do I need all that stuff to get ahead, or can it be can it hold you back if you haven't got them?
I certainly don't think it holds you back if you haven't got it. In all honesty, I learned a huge amount about a very niche subject during my PhD. I became very specialist. Has that been useful? Yeah. So the specialism I developed, that has on occasion been useful. I could probably count 10 times during my 10-year career that someone willed me out for that very specialist piece of knowledge. The skills I learned, I think I didn't learn any skills that you couldn't pick up outside a PhD. I think it just gave me a different environment to pick up those skills. So working in a you know, doing a PhD for me was a bit like doing a job, and I learned what some of those skills in a research environment were like. So when I joined an organization like BP, they had a kind of an expertise team, where you could call it a research team. And so I was kind of familiar with, say, the approaches or the methodology or the planning of those types of projects. But equally, I worked with geologists in BP who had BScs, and they were as capable. There was as someone who had a PhD and a postdoc, it's just a different, it's just joining the industry at a different stage in your career, having done more qualifications often. The exception is if your interest is in a very niche field. There are some very niche fields that, you know, that extra training goes a long way to getting you into. But, you know, if you just would like to be a geologist and work on subsurface energy solutions, it doesn't necessarily require the 3-4 years of niche subject area.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks. And what about Grills or Joey? In your careers, I mean, okay, so for architecture, I don't even quite know what qualifications you can get, but are there people, and in civil engineering, I mean, does it make any difference if you have a master's or PhD in civil engineering? If you've done if you've done an undergrad in civil engineering, is that enough? So could you comment to Kirill and Joey?
Yeah, can I start, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, so with PhDs and all kinds of accreditations, I mean, as all things in life, is pretty much what you put in is what you get out of it. And, you know, in the civil engineering industry, you have people who join the industry with apprenticeships and actually progress their way up and become chartered engineers. So you don't necessarily need to go, you don't even need to go to a university necessarily to become a chartered engineer. But otherwise, I was actually offered to do a PhD, and I decided not to, and decided to join the industry. And my topic was quite specialized, even though it was related to the sector that I decided to join. But at the time, I wasn't sure whether I want to become like a super specialist, like super narrow specialist in a certain topic. And I felt like, just developing broader skills and seeing how things work in the industry. But now, having worked in the industry for 2 years, I can say that it definitely makes sense to do a PhD if you know what you want to get out of it. So if you're very interested in a particular topic, and if you want to advance like a particular initiative, advance science, advance, some business aspects, it's definitely worth doing a PhD, and it can help you develop your skills in a very focused way, in such a way it would be difficult to do like when you're directly involved in the industry. However, in the civil engineering industry, when you do, oh sorry, I thought I froze. When we're involved with academics, we're always talking about innovation, and we're always rely on those researchers to see how can utilize their state-of-the-art knowledge and actually advance the very like nuances of engineering.
Thanks, Kyrillos. And Joey?
Yes, on that topic, I'm slightly biased, having 3 masters myself, so I really trust academic paths, but but I would say that it can be a waste of time if someone doesn't have a clear target on what he wants to get from his studies. So I would second that someone freshly graduated from a bachelor, if he has like a special route to follow, then academia can be a big added value. So myself, I graduated from Masters in Architecture originally, and then following the passion of sustainability, I could have done it through industry and experience purely. But I would say that academia has this analytical thinking that structure your way of doing things. It gives you a bunch of theory at once. And this really gives you the confidence of embarking on a new career. Not only that, but gives your employer a confidence that you're qualified. And talking about professional registration, there are routes without having master's qualifications for chartership, but then having the master's qualification as a shortcut. So they always talk, if you have a master's, then you'll end up reaching this level without doing any further work. So it's an added value. If you know your career path, where you're heading for, it's definitely a stepping stone to fast forward thing, like make it faster for a year or two and speed up your progress in your field, really.
Yeah. Hey, I've got another question for you. This is really, the more I'm doing this, the more interested I get in your thinking, in your careers. I mean, do you have role models? Do you have people that you see, watch, in not just now, but in wherever you've come from? Do you have role models? And a second question from you is around mentors. How much do you get mentoring, and how do you work through a mentoring process? But let me kick off with, in terms of just, what's going on down the corridor. Have you got role models, if you think that's where I want to be, and can you say something about mentoring and how important or not you found that, if you've done any at all? But so some open questions there. Do you want to go, Mark?
Sure, yeah. So I'll talk about my previous job first. So role models, I mean, in large organizations, there's such a diversity of people, and you will come across people who you think, I get how you work. I like that way of working, and you're often drawn to the people who you get on with, who you naturally find it easy to work with. So I think the first thing to say about role models, it's important not to just be drawn to the people who are just like you. Because while it's easy to do and you'll get on with them, there are many other people who are great at what they do and are also super role models. And yeah, in BP, certainly I had role models. I looked to people who I thought, it typically wasn't around technical skills though. In fact, it was never a technical thing that caught my eye about someone's way of working. It was always their communication skills or their ability to like draw people together. There are lots of I guess, the kind of Einstein model in academia, there's always the lone scientist model, someone who's really inspired, but actually those people who can draw lots of scientists and engineers together to deliver, and in the energy industry, to basically deliver some of the world's largest engineering projects. I mean, if you ever get the opportunity to visit some of the engineering projects that the energy industry do, they are mind-boggling how anyone has figured out which nuts and bolts you need to put that thing together. And then you've got to decide where to place it. So my role models were always people who drew people together. And mentoring equally, I guess mentoring right now for me is really important. I've changed sectors. I've left the energy sector and joined higher education. I think mentors are really important when you all through, but particularly when you sort of start to change track. And I think more than now ever, we're seeing earlier career stage, people who started their careers maybe in the kind of mid to late 2000s, changing tact a lot more than those who perhaps started their career back in the 1990s. I think that this idea of jumping around a bit and moving around is just more common, and mentors are invaluable there. And it's also rewarding to do it the other way and be a mentor, because you end up finding out quite a lot about yourself by mentoring someone. when that person asks you a tricky question, it forces you to really think.
Thanks, Mark. Joey?
Yes, I couldn't emphasize more what Mark just said about, like, academia is focused about knowledge and theory, but then when you move to professional environment, this is all about personality and how you combine and you communicate what you learned previously. So I cannot emphasize more the need of being involved in societies and voluntary work during your studies, because this will foster early stage your personality and communication skills, interpersonal skills, for you to drive and be a successful a professional later in a professional environment. So this is on one point, but on the other side, talking about the aspect of mentorship. I would say companies are doing a lot of effort on providing mentors to their employees, sorry. And this is in regards to their chartership scheme, for instance. So they prepare them for their chartership later, or even in regards to achieve their specific goals within the companies. So where I work, we have these kind of schemes, and I can just go to someone like a line manager or someone above me and just tell them, how can I present the work to a senior partner in the company, and then they will give you hints and tips on that. So being shadowed and shadowing others' work and being mentored is really key, and I would say companies are really spending a lot of effort on that regard.
Reels? Thank you, Joey. Great answer as well.
Yeah, I'll probably start with the mentoring question. So I would say, from my personal experience, you can never get enough knowledge at university, because there is just a vast amount of knowledge, and there is also a vast amount of specialist knowledge. And if you go work for a particular company, the chances are there'll be topics that you've never heard of, yet alone learned at university. And so there is a lot of learning on the job. And this was certainly the case for me as well. So with civil and structural engineering degree at Newcastle University, for structures, we learned mostly the kind of the core principles, the core knowledge. But for my actual job, which is bridge engineering, we learned absolutely nothing about bridges, and we learned absolutely nothing about the rail sector. So for me, the learning curve for the first couple of months was absolutely insane. And my mentor, who was a recent graduate as well, so he spent, I think, a year in the company, really helped me with that, because there was a massive amount of new standards which I've never heard of before. A massive amount of additional engineering knowledge to try to get your hand around. So in that regard, mentorship is very important. but that's a kind of specialist mentorship. And on the other hand, there is, if you join a professional institution and engage with different, all kinds of committees, there will always be a person who is much more experienced and has much greater skills than you, and it's always there's always an opportunity to learn and connect with them. So, and actually that's how I got some of my role models. And then answering the second question in terms of role models, and actually speaking of the International Women in Engineering Day, I can proudly say that some of my role models in my career were great women who are members of the Institution of Civil Engineers. And yeah, just for me personally, so things that I really admire is professionalism and competence. For example, when I work on a particular structure and you're stuck with a structural model, and you kind of reach the limit of your knowledge, and you have to go higher up the ranks and ask a more experienced engineer, and then you can see how they think, how they do things, and how they actually exercise responsibility as well. Because sometimes you find that you are limited by the codes and standards, so they don't describe everything, and you have to go to the very core knowledge and work from the first principles. And those experienced engineers have that confidence to to exercise their knowledge, go beyond the standard, actually address the limitation of standard and take responsibility for it. So if a computer program tells you something and you think it's wrong, and you overwrite it, and you do like a hand calculation and decide to go the other way, and you take responsibility for it, and then you submit it to a client, and then the general public is reliant on you. So that's where I really admire very experienced engineers and chartered engineers.
Brilliant. Yeah, just a quick add to that is that I still get mentored. All my colleagues on the executive board get mentored, and the other mentoring I'm doing is reverse mentoring. So I've got someone who's in a much earlier career stage who can actually help bring me down to what it's like for her. It's a lady academic at a different university, a woman academic at a different university. So I'm getting reverse mentored because I don't have enough lived experience in many areas of academia. I'm a bloke and I'm white, and so my reverse mentoring is actually to learn about lived experience. Okay, we've got a question come in, and I'm just going to modify the question. It's really around Shell's emission targets and in Holland and various rulings. But can I just change, because I don't want to, this is about careers, but I do think there's a relevant piece here, which is perhaps where the question's coming from. How do you square your circle? Mark used to work for BP, so go back into BP world, Mark, for the purposes of this question. You're working for organizations. Are there times where you, as an individual, feel uncomfortable with the organization you're in, and how do you deal with that? That might be a nice way of translating the question into something that's part of your sort of, that career discussion that we're having. Who wants to kick off? That's quite a tricky one.
I'll kick off because so you're right. So Richard, I joined BP. I had an offer letter, and the Gulf of Mexico Macondo incident was occurring real time, and my offer letter was on my doormat.
Yeah.
So do you join an organization that's going through one of undoubtedly the worst disasters that the energy industry has seen, both in terms of loss of life and of environmental damage? How do you make that call? And then if you do make that call like I did to still join, how do you then justify all those future things that you're going to do that are going to perhaps, for instance, increase carbon emissions for a period of time? It's a really difficult one. For me, there were two things that drove me. Is at the time, energy demand is going up. We've got people who need energy. It's quite easy to sit in the comfort of Western Europe and turn the gas on, have fuel for cooking to hand, while many other places don't have that yet. So energy is a challenge for all of us. I wanted to be part of that solution for energy, and I still do. I just see it in a different light now, and just see my role slightly differently. I think if you don't find it uncomfortable in a large organization, you might not be asking the right questions. I found that in a large organization, there's so many layers that you can hear the CEO pitch and be quite sold. And I think that's true of many of the large energy organizations that the attendees sort of reference in there. The big energy companies, their CEOs are making grand statements. But if you're a graduate deciding to join, do you join based on what you hear from the CEO at the very top level, or do you base it on the questions you ask at the interview to get into the crux of what you'll be doing as part of the solution? And that's what I always did. I said, well, okay, I'd quite like to do something related to, at the end of my career, I was doing things related to non-fossil fuels, so greenhouse gas mitigation. I got into that because I said I wanted to work on carbon capture storage. I wanted to do something different. So I think I squared it with the way that the world needs energy. You can be part of that solution and you can try and make change. And yeah, it won't happen overnight. These organizations are big ships that take a long time to turn around. But you can be part of that. And you can be part of that from a very early stage. You don't have to be 10 years in. You can be year one in. And if you ask a good, difficult question that someone hasn't got an answer to yet, you can make a big difference from day one.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Joey?
Sure. So coming back to being uncomfortable in others and your leaders' decisions that they're taking on your behalf. So, I'm lucky enough that in the company where we're working, even at lower levels, your voice is heard. So we're having monthly team catch-ups, or even sometimes weekly, with matching different generation of people working in the company, from graduate to partners and senior partners. So it is our chance. We are given the chance for us to be heard. So if we think that the process on a project wasn't the best, then we would comment how it can be better. Or so we've never been felt like squeezed and been in the corner and left to deal with our issues by ourselves. But if there is any way to optimize or to criticize, to have a better practice on doing things, we are heard, you are heard, and raise it. Just don't be shy about it. And what attracted me in what I'm doing, and which has some of the barriers and challenges, is that I'm working in an architecture firm where we work on integrated design as an approach. So we are engineering and architects working together closely on every single project. So this places energy and energy efficiency and sustainability at the heart of the design of what we do, starting believing in this early collaboration and discussions between engineers and designers together to deliver a holistic project. Yet this might have sometimes a barrier of communication or a barrier of priorities on things taking over. So sometimes the design is prioritized for its aesthetic value, more than the engineering in terms of performance, but then it's really keeping the balance. So no one is here to impose. Energy efficiency is important, sustainability is as well, but it's all about how you formulate this and find the right balance to have the proper recipe with these different professionalisms. So yes, sometimes you have to lower your expectations from things, but it's not really to feel uncomfortable, but to be realistic in a world where the budget of the client is as important as the performance from an engineering perspective and the aesthetic from a design perspective. I'm talking on designing a building or a city in here. So yes, there are uncomfortable moments, but it's up for us to really deal with it and be realistic in finding the proper recipe that matches everything around us.
Thanks, Joey. Kirill's?
Yes, I would probably give an example from the civil engineering industry, and in particular my company. And as I would say that in the civil engineering industry, the leading companies, including AECOM, are really listening to graduates and the opinions of younger people, because we do understand that in terms of climate change and biodiversity loss. A significant contribution has come from the civil engineering industry, and people are thinking about the future generations and how it can make things better, and that's why the voice of grid is often get highlighted. And speaking of FACO in particular, our leadership often talks about how the grids are actually leading the change, and how they're coming up with different initiatives, and how they're pushing, as Richard mentioned, through reverse mentoring, for example. And I would say in terms of being uncomfortable with certain decisions, there's always an opportunity to challenge decisions. And I mean, most engineers are reasonable in that regard, that they're always trying to find a better solution. So it's one thing to highlight the problem, which is still very important, but on the other hand, it's always important to look for a better solution as well. And if you are highlighting a problem, please also think how it can make things better as well. And sometimes, even if you do know a solution, it is necessary to find an appropriate pitch, or how you can present the solution to the appropriate management, or your client, because there are different factors involved in decision making, including finance, stakeholder engagement, environment, etc. So it's just a matter of trying to present your solutions in a certain way so that they get pushed forward and really hit on the important things for your listener.
Richard, can I just add
Yeah,
that even in my new career, being able to communicate around energy and the challenges we faced is still important, because if you went back 20 years when we were quite happy with our supply through fossil fuels, or maybe we weren't happy, but we that's what we were focused on still. Now the energy mix is every organization's challenge. Every organization around the world, whether you're a university, a cafe, or a multinational company, you somehow trying to think at some point, like the original question says, at some point someone's going to set me a boundary or a restriction on my carbon emissions, and I'm going to have to solve that. And it might be that you solve it through changing your supplier, and some organizations will be able to do that, but some organizations will be so big, or they'll have certain operations that mean they have to think outside the box. And I think that's where our graduates and people who are currently undertaking their degrees, who have some focus on energy, there is unlikely to be a sector that doesn't require someone with a knowledge of an energy system. It could be an ice cream maker for all you care, right? Because you're going to need refrigeration, and refrigeration is going to cost you CO2.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I just, the university that you've all graduated from, has got a commitment to spend around 100 million over the next 10 years to get to net zero. It's big beer, and it involves estates, it involves people services who might be thinking about home working as part of the solution and traveling less. So it is threaded through everything that we do. So those are great answers. Thanks so much to the three panelists. I've got one final question, which is really to say, so any final words of advice to our assembled group here that you think particularly you want to leave them with, that you think is particularly important? Perhaps Kirill's, if you don't mind, I might come to you first, because I think I went to Mark and Joey earlier on. So you first, and then we'll go to Joey and then Mark. So final bits of advice before we close out.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one thing that has kind of contributed to success in my early career, and which has really pushed my career forward, is generating initiatives and actually trying to make things better. And there's always someone listening, and always someone trying to find a better solution to a problem. And as a graduate, the chances are you have more spare time than more experienced people in your organization, and you have a better opportunity to develop those innovative solutions and cooperate with people. And well, it's something that you do want to exercise.
Thanks very much, girls. Joey?
Yes, I would say first, if you are passionate about the energy field, don't think that you should be an energy specialist, or there is a career that is like only specialized in energy related domain. You can be in any domain coming that's relevant in a way or another. So you can be an architect, you can be a mechanical engineer, civil engineer, or anything you're passionate from, and drive it towards energy efficiency. So there is no one way or one size fits all when it comes to this career. From that, I would say that on top of your focused learning and your studies or masters or any studies you're following, I would recommend to be curious to know what's happening outside of that. So because when you're going to enter the professional career, you're going to soon know that it's all about multidisciplinary aspect of doing things. And don't like, if we are just focused on our learnings and our specialty, we miss on the communications and this collaboration with others. So having basic knowledge and being curious about different fields around you would definitely be an added value. And a point that we already touched base, it's not only about knowledge, but it's about creating your unique personality and the social aspect of work as well. So we focused on the professionalism of doing things. Yes, it is very important, but then there is a big social aspect of work, and these interpersonal skills with your colleagues as well, where it's really the way how you communicate your knowledge, which is very important, and the way you volunteer outside of work, the way you network. This is a very, very key point to progress and successfully in your career. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Joey. Mark?
Well, I think for anyone who is in the energy sector now or looking at joining the energy sector is, first of all, say, don't expect that where you join is where you will end up. If we know anything about the energy industry right now, is that we don't actually know what it's going to look like in 2050. There are various projections and pathways, and you know, your career in the energy sector could follow any one of those pathways. So I first of all expect change, because the energy sector changes rapidly. I think the other thing is, don't be afraid of that change, and look for the opportunity to embrace that change, because that change brings those new experiences that Joey and Krills have talked about that push you to challenge yourself. And they you know, for me, that has provided, you know, the stimulation and motivation. So I think, yeah, that change is seen as a positive thing as part of your career. It's an opportunity to learn and to develop as an individual, and be part of a solution for what, you know, is a huge challenge for all of us.
No, that's fantastic. Really, really helpful. I just make one final comment myself. I think I spent a first sort of, when in my career in the oil industry and then as an academic, a large amount of the first part was about, you know, some of the things that Joey said about team working and technical ability. And then I spent a lot of the last 10 years, 15 years thinking about leadership and what it's like. And so my mindset has completely changed over the last sort of 20, 30 years of, you know, I was initially being technically challenged, and now the challenge is around change projects and leading and influencing people. And so as your career evolves, you realize sometimes I'm using it's seemingly a different part of the brain, although it probably isn't that different. So that your roles can really change as you move from a sort of technical focus to leadership and strategy, and taking the advice of the technical people around you and then trying to make a sensible decision from it, and behaving with integrity and honesty and openness and those personal traits which people will spot a mile off if you don't have them, and they carry a lot of weight. It's how you conduct yourself, and people watch those small things you do as well as the big things you do. So that's a fantastic summary from our three experts in very different fields: civil engineering, geoscience, and architecture. And it's absolutely clear anyone looking for a career in many aspects of the future world will come across the challenge of, 9 billion people living on planet Earth in decades to come, and how we don't break planet Earth in the process, and we supply energy that's affordable and not putting up our carbon emissions. So I just wanted to really thank Joey, Mark and Kirill's for all of their openness and advice. Thanks very much for the questions and for all the people attending, and do feel free to come back for more events. I'm sure we'll be organising them, Rebecca and everyone else in the Advancement Office. Any alumni, of course, all of you welcome to come back to the university. We'd be delighted to see you on the campus. It might have changed a little bit since you were last there. Buildings are going up. The Helix, which used to be a building site, it now looks like it is a fully developed site where we're mixing practitioners, academics and students all in the same place. So please do come back and visit, and thank you very much everyone for contributing. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.